The chronic disease expert. We can now reverse stage 4 cancer. Hello, this is Coach Bill. For every goal, there's a right way, least time, max results, least injury, and a wrong way, wasting time, injury, and bad results. It applies to relationships, making money, whatever. Let's vet the coach. Currently, I'm 220 at 10% body fat. My blood pressure is 75 over 115. I get my blood work done every 6 months. My A1C is 5.1. My resting glucose is 78, and my coronary calcium CT scan is clear. I got 42 years in the gym and 30,000 hours. The chronic disease expert. We can now reverse stage 4 cancer. Wow. Dr. William Lee is the world-renowned medical scientist specializing in chronic disease blood vessel growth. He's the founder and president of Angiogenesis Foundation. His groundbreaking research has led to 44 medical treatments that target over 70 diseases. Here are some of the tips he has. Coffee is good to reduce cancer. Inflammation is gasoline on the fire. Diet has to be fun and sustainable. No alcohol. And here's a great alcohol alternative. Ledio.com. Dr. Lee's 5 favorite foods. Coffee, tea, tree nuts. That's almonds and walnuts. Tomatoes, berries, and green leafy vegetables, including Brussels sprouts, bok choy, broccoli. Please enjoy this video. It's absolutely incredible.
I've had patients go from stage 4 cancer to stage 0. So I have now seen where the end of cancer is coming from. I've seen how the war is going to finish. And here's how.
Dr. William Lee is a Harvard-trained physician and medical scientist
whose work is revolutionizing the way we understand
and fight some of the most devastating diseases facing our world today.
I'm going to give you a brand new view of thinking about cancer. And this is shocking to some people to hear, but every 24 hours, there are 10,000 mistakes that are made in your body. Each of those is a microscopic cancer. But the reason that we don't become more sick from all kinds of diseases, including cancer, is because our body is hardwired with its own health defense systems. But here's the problem. We are presently seeing the fallout of some of the not so good moves that we made in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. For example, people might consume as much as a credit card's worth of plastic every single week, which is very worrying. And I will tell you why. But there's also the foods you eat, which contribute to taking your health defenses down. But the good news is that you can actually put shields up as well. So this is like our experiment, and we're trying to discover drugs that could be developed as cancer treatments. So we said, let's remove half of them and let's swap them out with food. I was a skeptic, but when I saw these results, it made my jaw drop. Because the holy grail in the pharmaceutical industry is to find something that can kill cancer stem cells. And we don't have a drug that can do that. Turns out Mother Nature beat us to the punch. And there's more than 200 foods that I've studied that can actually starve cancers.
And if you had to pick 5 based on the science you've seen, what would those top 5 be?
The good news is that it's food that we can eat every single day. So, number 1.
The key diseases that people are and should be most concerned about today based on their correlation to the food that we eat.
Yeah, if you look at the biggest health crises in the world today in developed countries, you're really talking about cardiovascular disease being the number 1 killer, diabetes, and all the consequences, the devastating consequences that come out. Listen, your blood sugar is not being very well regulated. That's the definition over time of diabetes, but the knock-on effect of having high uncontrolled sugars is really underlying metabolic chaos. There's a whole litany of terrible conditions that happens every downstream from that, from eye disease to wounds that don't heal, et cetera, et cetera. Cancer is another one. Dementia is a bigger and bigger problem as our population ages. And a lot of people don't recognize this, but the saying that inflammation is a root cause of chronic disease, scientifically correct. But there are many, many inflammatory diseases that are out there that don't get enough airplay, that really take away the quality of your life as you get older. And so I think all of these things, it's not just about mortality, it's about morbidity. It's not just about living long, it's about living well and feeling good along the way.
And where do you think we are as a society, especially as Westerners, as it relates to our relationship with health and food? Because when I look at some of the stats around life expectancy, there's been a bit of a stagnation in, I think it was 2020-ish time. But then also when you look at a lot of these chronic diseases, whether it's diabetes, whether it's cancer, these things seem to be on the rise. So as a nation, it feels like we've got more information than ever before. But when you look at the objective numbers,
Yeah.
for some reason we're not going in the right direction. What's your 30,000-foot view on it?
30,000 foot, there's more and more people in the world. So once you get huge numbers, the diseases that affect most people are going to magnify. So just as a matter of math, we're going to see more of these chronic diseases. But we're also going to be seeing two things that are happening that actually oppose each other. One thing is that the lifestyle and dietary harms that have occurred over 20, 30, 50 years, from the industrialization of food, from the industrialization of healthcare, from degradation of the environment. Those are all things that take time to manifest. And so to some extent, we are presently seeing the fallout of some of the not so good moves that we made in the 1950s and 60s and 70s and so on and so forth. So decades later, we're beginning to see the consequences, the devastation of things that happened decades ago. That's one side of elevating, increasing the incidence and prevalence of health conditions, bad health conditions. There's another side that is countervailing. And the other side, which is the side that's the team I play on, is it really exciting. Because one thing that's different is that we now have tremendous scientific power to get in there and probe diseases and also indeed probe health, which is something we're not doing often enough. And in so doing, we're actually able to find solutions to the problems that counter some of those harms. So we're beginning to discover now, how do we actually prevent diabetes? How do we prevent cardiovascular disease? Can we reverse heart disease? And even conditions that seemed like no-win situations. And I like to talk about this, is that in my career, I never thought as a physician I would actually see the cure to cancer, the end of cancer. But actually, I tell you, I have now seen where the end of cancer is coming from. I've seen how the war is going to finish, because I've had well over a dozen patients, and there are hundreds of people like this that are starting to form, that can go from stage 4 cancer, that's game over cancer, to stage 0. We can do this. And not for everybody yet, but we're beginning to see where the light at the end of the tunnel is, and it involves your immune system. And some of the remarkable scientific breakthroughs are teaching us that our body heals itself against diseases as serious as cancer in ways that the pharmaceutical industry can't by itself do, but it really relies on the body. So when you talk about food as medicine or medicine as medicine, none of them are as powerful as what the body is hardwired to do by itself. So I've told you some scary statistics, but now let me kind of give you where the breakthroughs are coming through, right? So with this kind of knowledge, what can we do with cancers? Not just breast cancers, but in general. Number one, we know that if you boost your immune system with foods, with exercise, diet, lifestyle, you're going to actually make your immune defenses a lot stronger to patrol your body to wipe out those microscopic cancers. That's why healthy diet and lifestyle lowers the risk of cancer. That's why eating the right foods that boost your immunity can substantially lower your risk of cancer as well. We also know that you can eat foods that support, prompt up, fortify your body's natural ability to control blood vessels. Keep those blood vessels where they're supposed to be, and get rid of those blood vessels where you don't want them to be, which is kicking in the cockpit to take over your circulation to feed cancers. So if you eat foods that are anti-angiogenic foods, like out on Staple, you've got coffee and tea. Both of those contain natural substances that cut off the blood supply and starve cancers. That's a good thing. So that's why we know what we do with our diet can actually help to lower the risk of cancer as well.
I'm assuming the opposite also applies. I could eat foods, I can drink things that cause my body to malfunction, i.e. makes the blood vessels unregulated, and starts to feed the cancer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that. So,
okay.
So I told you the body's hardwired with these defenses, shields up, right? That's what we want to do. Because shields are already normally up, you want to raise them higher. But what about, and this is a brilliant question you're asking, a very probing question. What are the things that take your shields down, right? What are the things that turn off the smoke alarm in your house, that unlock the doors?
Can I take a guess? Is it this?
Okay. Now, I know the answer that you're setting this conversation up for, which is a burger with meat. Is that actually disease causing? And I would tell you that yes and no. A burger is something that many people enjoy eating, and I would say eating meat, eating burgers, even eating ultra processed foods once in a while is not going to harm you if your health defenses are naturally strong. But if you make it a habit, a regular habit of eating this at the expense of eating healthier foods, more plant-based foods, less processed foods, okay, you are actually going to tip your odds where the diseases are more likely to get you. What that means is that overeating fast foods like burgers will actually contribute to taking your health defenses down, shields down.
So what
Can also do the same thing. So if you're eating an excess of added sugar, we all have heard by now, glucose spikes and glucose crashes. I don't actually use those words, by the way. I don't like to actually cast our body's metabolism in terms of spikes and crashes. I think those are fear words that get attention. They do make you pay attention to it. But in fact, really, the healthy body sort of has, smooth ups and smooth downs. They're gentle slopes up and down of our blood sugar, and that's completely fine. All right. And it should be like that. However, if you have an uphill climb of your blood glucose and it continues to stay up, that can actually happen if you're eating too much added sugar. Okay. Added sugar, ultra processed foods. What happens is that your blood sugars, your intake of the sugar, glucose, rises up, 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 up. And now your body has, your metabolism to chase that blood sugar down, and it's got to work harder and make more insulin. And eventually you just wear out that system, and then you have high blood glucose and an insensitive metabolism. And that's the beginning of sort of the dominoes starting to fall apart in your body. And so sugar, high blood sugar, added sugar is a problem. You get it from fruit, not a problem. Okay. No one's going to be eating a crazy amount of fruit. This is why extremes aren't good. Diversity, switch it out. Keep it interesting for yourself. This is what our human nature wants anyway. It's how we're hardwired. You'll actually be fine. So salt, sugar, those are two offenders. Okay. Alcohol is another one that actually can take down your health defenses over time. People say, well, what about red wine? Isn't red wine healthy? What I would say is that actually the fermented products or the bioactives that come out of red grapes, from the skin of red grapes that's found in red wine, there can be some healthful properties of the resveratrol and other polyphenols that come out of that are in wine, but it's never the alcohol. Yeah. It's not the alcohol in the beer, the wine, the whiskey. Nope, none of that. The alcohol is a universal toxin. Toxic to your brain, toxic to your liver, toxic to your heart. Can't get away from that. Your body will recover. Shields up. It can take a ding. It's like a drink is sort of like a driving behind a truck, and it flings a little pebble right into your windshield. You might get a little spider in the windshield. Okay, don't worry, it'll repair itself. You'll fix yourself. You'll bounce back. It's not going to break your windshield. But if you keep on drinking, you're actually going to smash your windshield. And that's why alcoholism is so devastating to the health. But, a small amount of alcohol. So alcohol itself is a toxin.
Do you drink?
I rarely drink. And when I drink, it's in moderation.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about stress as well. Does that bring down the...
So besides the foods you eat, other things that can compromise your health defenses. And by the way, there are 5 health defenses. We talked about blood vessels. We talked about immunity, but there's 3 other ones that are core to functioning in the healthiest way possible. If you want longevity, you need all 5 of your health defenses and more to be working in your favor. But stress, what does stress do? Lowers your immune system, shields down. All right. Those microscopic cancers, whoa. That's why stressful people are more vulnerable to developing diseases like cancer. All right. Stress also causes your blood pressure to go up and causes neurotransmitters, hormones to be released from your brain and your kidneys, your adrenal glands that actually wear down your circulation. Now your angiogenesis system is also not functioning as well to protect yourself and keep good blood flow going where it needs to go. Now your circulation is actually down. So again, stress also can actually damage the DNA. We talked about naturally copying and pasting and having errors. Add some stress to it. Now it's kind of like you're trying to copy that sentence I was telling you perfectly. Now I'm going to come in and just smash your fingers down every now and then. And let's see if you actually make a mistake. You will. All right. Stress will actually do that. It's devastating to have so much stress continuously. Listen, by the way, I want to be really clear to anybody listening or watching this. A little stress is actually good for you. You know, like just being coddled all day long and living in a happy bubble. That's not good for our health either. We kind of get lackadaisical. We let our guard down. Little stress. I mean, anybody who's hardworking, successful knows that, it's not the no pain, no gain. It's that the grit that goes along with it, which gives a little stress, keeps us sharp, which is a good thing. You want to be on. So a little stress is good, but when that stress is unabated, it literally sinks your health defenses. It is just taking those shields down.
Yeah, I've noticed that with myself. I've spent the last 10 years running businesses, a little bit more than 10 years now, but probably last 13 years running businesses. And the only times when I really get sick, where I'm like out for a week and I really, really feel it, is 1 week after 2 weeks of stress. So when I say 2 weeks of stress, what I mean there is when something happens in my life, business, where that it's kind of chronic and it's enduring stress. I can deal with having a stressful day. I can deal with having 2 stressful days in a row. But when I've had like 2 weeks of an enduring issue, like an enduring angst or a problem, almost perfectly predictably, a week later, I'm sick. And I'm extremely rarely sick because I think I sleep really well. I think I eat really clean. And so it's taught me something about if I zoom out on that and see what's going on in my body, well, eventually, like my body's my immune system is running out of energy. Almost.
Yeah, more than in your immune system. So when you're super stressed, it also it interferes with your ability to sleep well.
Yeah.
When you're sleeping well, sleeping is something that I was taught when I was a kid. When you're sleeping, you're resting. And when you're resting, you're not active, right? Well, that's just our physical self. It turns out when we're sleeping, even though our muscles may not be moving like we are during the day, in fact, a lot of other systems, including our health defenses, are being repaired, renewed, regenerated, rebooted while we are sleeping. So in those ideally 8 hours, 7 to 9 hours, 8's the sweet number, our brain is cleansing itself, detoxifying itself, releasing. Do you know about the glymphatic?
So let's close off on microplastics. What are the easy wins in our lives, do you think, when you think about microplastics? Is it just removing anything plastic that I eat from? Or are there some sort of easy, cheap wins? Is it my shampoo? Is it my frying pan? Is it a container?
Yeah. So I always tell people that the easiest way to lower your exposure to microplastics is to throw out your plastic cups, your plastic plates, and your plastic silverware. Mm-hmm. Okay. And get ceramic or glass. That's the best way to actually avoid those. And also when you're buying food, try to avoid food that comes clearly packaged in plastic.
Stuff like that. But what evidence do we have that it's dangerous, and why is it dangerous?
Yeah. Because the tube of your body with all the organs packed into it, just like we're seeing here. Look at all these organs packed in. You got your liver, you got your stomach, you got your colon and your small intestines. That's packed into the tube. All right. It's kind of like packing for vacation. Some people are really, really skilled at packing. They can actually fold their socks and their underwear and their pants. And it's like, oh my, you're a genius. You're a packing genius, right? Now, visceral fat grows between those folded shirts and pants, and it fills a lot of space in there. When you have too much of it, not only does it fill up the suitcase of your body, the tube of your body, but it starts to push on organs, which is not healthy because it's all packing inside between the spaces, the potential spaces in there. And then when it grows beyond its own blood supply, the visceral fat starts to starve. It becomes hypoxic, meaning it's not getting enough oxygen, bigger than the amount of blood vessels that are growing in there. And now you've got the center of the fat starved of oxygen. The inflammatory cells start moving in. And now you've got this fat that's outgrown its own blood supply that's now becoming very inflammatory. And because it's packed all throughout the tube of your body, into the suitcase of your body, it's leaking out that inflammation everywhere. So think about it. Like if you have a neatly packed suitcase and you're like, I'm going to put some lotion and cream, canisters of lotion and cream. I'm going to pack it everywhere in between the spaces. Okay, look, Stephen, pack a few, but let's stop right there. And no, I'm going to pack like 20 or 30 of them. And you keep on stuffing it. Even though the suitcase, it's a hard suitcase and you can put a lot in there. Now you're starting to press on the clothing. You're going to scrunch up your pants. And here in the body, you're scrunching up your organs. Now, why don't we make one of those tubes of cream? Let's break one of them open. Now it's leaking. All right. And that's what's happening when your fat is so inflamed, it starts to leak inflammation. Now imagine that cream starts to leak out into the interstices of your suitcase. Now you've got a suitcase, looks skinny on the outside, looks like a suitcase. It could be a carry-on, but now all the organs, all the clothes you packed so neatly are squeezed and scrunched off, and now the lotion is leaking everywhere. That is the analogy of excess body fat in a small container, spreading out, compressing the organs and leaking out, and that's why it's dangerous.
Oh gosh, and there's a link there to cancer.
Yeah, so studies have actually shown that, and this was a study done by Cornell in New York, looking at Swedish women who were normal body size or skinny. So you've heard of skinny fat. This is what they were studying. And they looked at these women to see, they did DEXA scans, as you described, to see how much body fat they had. And then they followed them over 13 years. And they actually found that women who did not have extra body fat had, normal risk of breast cancer, but women who had skinny fat, remember all the women in the study, and so 3,000 women actually were normal body size. They weren't supermodels, but they were just normal size women. Some of them were slimmer than others, but none of them were obese. None of them were overweight, just normal size. But they knew at the baseline what the DEXA scan showed. And what they found is that women who had excess body fat over the period of 13 years had a threefold increase in the risk of developing breast cancer. And it's linked to higher inflammatory markers in their bloodstream, which makes total sense. The leaking body cream, the leaking inflammation, in a skinny tube, all right, or normal size tube, normal suitcase. Look, the suitcase can't expand bigger. It's got a finite size, but it's leaking out. And this is because cancer thrives in an inflammatory environment. If you have inflammation, even a microscopic cancer like we talked about, but a small tumor, putting inflammation in the environment of a cancer is like pouring gasoline on the embers of a fire. You ever go camping, you have a campfire, it's almost out at the very end. Now, if you pour some gasoline in it, boom, whoosh, you're going to have to create a bonfire all over again. That's how dangerous inflammation is. So that's why excess visceral fat, inflammatory fat, is so dangerous and linked to cancer. And by the way, not just breast cancer. It turns out that excess visceral fat has been linked to 14 other cancers, increased risk of 14 other cancers, everything from colon, ovarian, lung, breast, prostate. It's a growing list of cancers that seem to be you would be at a higher risk if you had high levels of visceral fat. And it makes total sense given the inflammation.
I read about this a while ago in JAMA, and it examined the impact of illness anxiety disorder, which they call IAD, formerly known as hypochondriitis, and the impact that being avoidant of health and illness has on your mortality rates. And the research analyzed data from approximately 45,000 individuals over a 24-year period, comparing 4,000 patients who had this anxiety around their health and were avoidant. And the findings showed that those with IAD, that were anxious about health and getting checkups and those kinds of things, had an 84% higher risk of death during the study period, dying on average 5 years earlier than those without the disorder. And again, causation's hard to establish there because it could mean that being an anxious person means your cortisol's up anyway. Being an anxious person means you make worse dietary choices. But I've always remembered that and thought about how it's, I find it much better, especially as I age and I'm going to be now confronted with more risks, especially things in men like prostate cancer. Being on the front foot is probably a better approach.
Well, and if you take some proactive approaches using food as medicine, where you got to eat you got to eat every day. Most people eat 3 times a day. Most people encounter food about 5 times a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a couple of snacks. If you realize every time you're encountering food is an opportunity to choose a food, an ingredient that actually raises your shields, supports your health defense systems, and know that, and trust your body, trust your health defense systems, that if you raise your shields, you're less likely to actually have problems later. Won't eliminate them. Okay. There's no guarantees in life, but it'll lower the risk. Here's an example, Stephen. Research studies have shown that tomatoes are good for overall health. You mentioned prostate cancer. So studies have shown that men who eat tomatoes regularly, cooked tomatoes, actually have a 29% lower risk of developing prostate cancer. It's pretty good. What's the dose of tomatoes that you need, cooked tomatoes you need to eat? 2 to 3 servings per week. All right. I can probably accomplish that. How much each time? Do I got to eat a wheelbarrow of tomato each time? No. The typical serving that this study supports is just half a cup of cooked tomatoes is per serving.
How do they know this stuff? Because obviously, how do they isolate that in a test?
So these are from large scale population studies. In this case, it's a epidemiological study called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, where they developed hypotheses and they looked at outcomes over the course of 25 years, and they looked for statistical correlations. So they found that tomatoes lower the risk of prostate cancer based on people reporting their tomato eating. Then they actually went back and looked at the report within the data collected. How much do they eat on average every week? So that then you can actually back calculate the dose. All right. Now, I told you earlier about the way that I do research, foods and medicine research. Let's take it further. Let's figure out what's in a tomato. Well, tomatoes have lots of. It's got sugar. It's got some salt. It's got carotenoids, which are bioactives. One of which is lycopene. Well, okay, what does lycopene do? Guess what lycopene does? Lycopene in the lab will cut off the blood supply to tumors. Anti-angiogenesis. Shores up your health defense systems, prevents cancer from getting a blood supply. And in fact, in correlative studies, they've actually taken the prostate cancer biopsies of men who did not avoid prostate cancer. So they were tomato eaters who went on to develop prostate cancer anyway. Nothing takes your risk to zero. And they looked at them, and what they found is that those men who ate more tomatoes had fewer blood vessels in their prostate cancer, and the prostate cancer was also less aggressive. So people who ate 4 times and 5 times and 6 times had fewer and less aggressive blood vessels growing into their prostate cancer. So that's an example where, if I told you, consider having some cooked tomatoes a few times a week, and you don't need a lot. Even half a cup is enough. Oh, why cook tomatoes? Well, because it turns out lycopene is a natural chemical that in its native form, pick a tomato off the vine and eat it that like an apple, it's absorbed in your body, but not avidly, not as much as possible. What is that?
That is coffee.
Okay.
And we've been talking a little bit about brown fat.
Yeah.
Is there a link between fat and coffee? Because I had someone the other day saying that if you want to lose weight, drink coffee. And I wasn't sure if that was...
Well, so coffee is a beverage made with coffee beans. Coffee beans are plant-based foods. Coffee beans contain many polyphenols, including chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is anti-inflammatory. Chlorogenic acid also turns on your brown fat. So it triggers your brown fat, and it causes your brown fat, the mitochondria, to fire up, undergo thermogenesis to burn down harmful white fat or visceral fat. So a cup of coffee a day, or actually the dose is actually about 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day, will definitely cause your brown fat, good fat, to burn down your bad fat, your harmful fat, your visceral fat.
What about fasting? People often talk about fasting as an intervention, as a form of medicine for the body. And I wondered if you had a take on that. Yeah.
Listen, fasting is beneficial. Fasting's good, and fasting's very old. It's not just a recent trend. If you go back thousands of years, I mean, if you look at some of the oldest religions in the world, fasting was part of their ritual that would happen, throughout the year. Now, people go, well, what about intermittent fasting? How long should I fast? I try to tell people there is no magic formula for success for fasting because we're all different and our bodies are different, our lifestyles are different. There's no universal fasting protocol that's going to be one size fits all. However, I will tell you an easy way to fast, because fasting is very natural to us, is just paying attention to what you do every day and be mindful. So when you're sleeping, you're not eating. When you're not eating, you're fasting. So I try to be reassuring. So guess what? You're fasting every day anyway. When you fall asleep, you're fasting. All right. And the longer you're not eating and sleeping, the more time your metabolism, the Ferrari of your metabolism, of your body, can switch gears to burn down any extra fat that's accumulated. Now, if you've been eating whatever you want over time, you probably built up a lot of extra fat. Now, from your scans, apparently not. You don't have too much. All right. But if you're fasting regularly, you're burning down all that extra stuff. Okay. And so then how do you optimize that without having to calendarize your fast and figure out, how to schedule your meals? I try to make things as scientific, but as practical as possible. And so I tell people, you want to really get involved in intermittent fasting. Easiest way is take advantage of what you're doing already. And that is, if you're sleeping, try to sleep 8 hours a day. So how do you sleep 8 hours a day? I don't know. I said, if you go to bed at 11 o'clock, get up at 7 o'clock, you get 8 hours of sleep. All right. We know that that's the sweet spot for your brain, for your metabolism, for burning unharmful body fat. How do you get more out of that? How do you turn that 8 hours of fasting into more? Well, what I say is that the night before, when you're eating dinner, let's say you eat from 7 to 8 o'clock in the evening. What I say is that when you finish dinner and you put your dishes away in the sink or in the dishwasher, that's it. No more eating. Stop eating. Nothing until the next day. If you're going to have dessert or whatever, squeeze it in there, but don't take a snack with you and sit by the television or, absentmindedly gobble food, and don't, before you go to bed, eat a big chunk of whatever. Okay. Now you got 3 hours before you go to bed at 11. Again, this is all a theoretical model. 3 hours of not eating. Your blood sugar goes down. Your insulin goes down because you're not eating anymore. All right. Now your metabolism shifts gears 3 hours earlier. Okay. Now you've got those 8 hours plus 3 hours. You got 11 hours. Now, when you get up in the morning, okay, let's say you get up at 7 in the morning, don't do what our moms told us to do, right? So if you were like me growing up, my mom, when I got up, was like, hurry up and get to breakfast and eat something so you have enough energy to actually go to school and learn something. All right. So I developed this instinct of actually just getting up and eating as quickly as I can, getting some breakfast in. What if I told you that what I do now, when I get up in the morning, I deliberately don't do what my mother told me to do. I get up, I take my time getting ready, I get dressed. I don't eat anything right away. In fact, if I'm dressed and I'm ready for the day, I might go check it out. I might go outside and take a look at the outside. I might go for a quick walk or check my emails, or I might read a chapter of a book or read a few pages of a book. I wait at least an hour before I eat anything. Now let's do the math, Stephen. 8 o'clock, stop eating. 11 o'clock, go to bed, 3 hours. 11 to 7, 8 hours. 3 plus 8 is equal to 11 hours. I got 11 hours of fasting in. Now I get up and I don't eat for another hour. Boom, 12 hours of fasting, just like that. Okay. Now, if you really want to do that 16-hour fasting, 16-8, just skip breakfast and get to lunch. And as long as you don't overeat at lunch, which does require a little discipline after you go for your fasting window, that you don't overeat and you're eating the right foods, that's how you actually get to do intermittent fasting in the most natural way possible.
So there's one part of the body that we haven't talked about, which is, and my little mannequin here, inside its head, the brain.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how some of the themes we've talked about link to one of the most common brain diseases, which people talk about, which is Alzheimer's and dementia. We talked about, I can't say that long word, but angiogenesis. Is there a link between angiogenesis, what we in the brain, health, dementia, Alzheimer's?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned to you that the human body's got 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels that are coursing through the entire body, bringing the oxygen and nutrients through the highways and byways of health. All right. 400 miles of those blood vessels are in your brain. 400 miles of blood vessels are actually coursing through our brain, and our brain is super metabolically active. You know, where the engine of the brain is functioning all the time, regardless of your IQ, regardless of what type of task you do. Our brain is very, very metabolically active, highly dependent upon a healthy circulation. Now, what we do know as people get older is that problems can occur with brain function. And the reason I'm framing it this way is that it's quick to jump to a term that people use like dementia or Alzheimer's disease, thinking it's one thing. But in fact, dementia is just a descriptive term for your cognition not working properly, most commonly as you actually age. Alzheimer's, even though it is one type of diagnosis, is probably several different kinds of disease as well. And we do know that there are different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is a subset of dementia. Alzheimer's dementia. There's a more common type of dementia called vascular dementia. And that's where those 400 miles of blood vessels in your body actually narrow, get hard, get clogged up, and don't have good blood flow. So you can imagine if you were to actually interrupt the sprinkler system, the tubing, the blood vessels, the tributaries bringing oxygen to your brain within those blood vessels, okay, over time, your brain is not going to function very well. So vascular dementia is by far the more common type of dementia. So what can we do to maintain healthy angiogenic blood vessels throughout the course of our lives? For anybody who aspires towards longevity, all right, you should be thinking about how to avert that path where your blood vessels, your circulation to your brain gets impaired. The more vascular, blood vessel healthy, angiogenesis supporting diet and lifestyle and medications that you take, the better it's actually going to be. Now, well, here's what's interesting. What are some of those things? Turns out that dark chocolate, plant-based foods, the cacao, actually helps your body produce something called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide actually widens your blood vessels so you get better blood flow. So dark chocolate is one of those foods that actually seems to be able to promote better vascular health, including in the brain. Now, there are other foods that can produce nitric oxide as well. Beetroot actually can produce nitric oxide. Spinach can produce nitric oxide as well. Those are vascular healthy. Now, here's the other thing. When you produce nitric oxide, like with these foods, you know what nitric oxide does? It recruits stem cells, healthy stem cells, not cancer stem cells, but healthy stem cells from your bone marrow.
Stem cells are primitive cells that can turn into anything you need them to be. Turn into a brain, heart, lung, liver, skin, hair. Our stem cells actually regenerate us from the inside out. Now, you know that one of the things that happens as we get older is our brain atrophies and can start to degenerate. It shrinks. Literally a scan of an older person, the brain matter, the mass of the brain shrinks inside the skull. Mm-hmm. It's like a cotton shirt that shrank. Mm-hmm. And you see this actually in a scan. And so in order to be able to try to keep the shrinking from happening, you want to make sure there's good blood flow going, which actually helps to keep the brain growing in a healthy and maintained in a healthy sort of way. So stem cells that are recruited by nitric oxide actually can help to also regenerate the blood vessels and keep the blood vessels healthy, feeding the brain. That's the connection between Alzheimer's and dementia and angiogenesis. Now, for Alzheimer's, I worked with a colleague, Dr. Anthony Vagnucci, some years ago, and we published what was then an editorial in The Lancet, very prestigious British medical publication. And we were connecting the dots between angiogenesis and Alzheimer's disease. And here's how it works. Most people assume that if you've got Alzheimer's disease or someone has Alzheimer's disease, they don't have very good blood flow. They're not going to have a lot of angiogenesis. They got problems, right, of their circulation, of course. And in fact, if you look at the blood flow studies, brain scans looking for blood flow in Alzheimer's brains, indeed, you see poorer blood flow in people who have actually Alzheimer's disease. But it turns out the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease have more blood vessels that aren't working well. So they're abnormal angiogenic blood vessels are not working well. So you don't get good blood flow. So the scans don't show them. They're just not creating blood flow.
Guess what those blood vessels are doing, those abnormal blood vessels? They have been discovered to secrete a neurotoxin that kills your brain cells. So, abnormal angiogenesis in Alzheimer's disease grows blood vessels that don't create blood flow, but they secrete a toxin that kills brain cells. And they also secrete the precursor to build up the plaque. So we published this as a hypothesis in an editorial in The Lancet, and now there's a whole field looking at angiogenesis and Alzheimer's disease.
It's crazy how this all stems back to this idea that food is medicine.
Yeah. I mean, listen, before we had medicine as medicine, before we had pharmaceuticals in the 1930s, that's all we had. That's all humans had, our diet and lifestyle for medicines, and so I think that's really, I think what's happened is that during the Industrial Revolution that occurred with pharmaceuticals, we put aside a tool in the toolbox that we've always had. In fact, that's the only thing we had before. And we focused myopically just on what pharmaceuticals can do. Now, I'm telling you, as somebody who's developed biopharmaceuticals and who is still very much involved in that, new medicines can be life-saving. Old medicines can be life-saving. And so you never want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. What we have forgotten about is that tool in the toolbox that's been with humanity forever, which is what we do with our food. And what I'm saying is that what we can do now with the work that I'm doing in food as medicine is we can take the modern science, that deep probe, that extraordinary level of sophistication that we use for drug development, and we can use it, apply it to understand why our foods help us, which foods help us, and what types of outcomes we're actually looking for. And so food as medicine, bringing it back into the fold, is just replacing a tool in the toolbox. But now we are actually fortifying it with the knowledge provided by science of what we should choose and when. And
your metabolism and living longer. I know that you must have some favorite, people use the term superfoods all the time, but there must be some foods where you look at them and just think they are little miracles in their own right. So I wanted a little challenge for you is, if you had to pick 5 of your favorite foods based on the research that you've done, the science you've seen, what would those top 5 be?
I would bring coffee.
Okay.
Because of all the polyphenols in coffee. I'd bring tea.
Okay.
I tend to drink coffee in the morning and I have tea at night. And I'm not caffeine sensitive, so I can have the tea at night. If you allow me, I'll actually lump those into my beverages.
Okay.
Under one category. I'll bring tree nuts.
Tree nuts?
Tree nuts. Walnuts, almonds, macadamias, pistachios. I love nuts, tree nuts. And, not the prepackaged kind, but I like to, kind of like toast them up myself and flavor them myself. I would bring that because of the dietary fiber, the healthy it's a good source of protein, some healthy fats in it as well, and can kill some cancer stem cells while we're at it. Okay. So tree nuts are actually good. I would bring tomatoes because I love tomatoes.
Okay.
It's a great source for hydration, good source of lycopene, which we talked about, good for metabolism. I would take berries. Berries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries are among my favorites. Raspberries, you might be surprised at this, but raspberries are pound for pound or weight for weight, one of the most fiber-rich foods out there. They're light, they're hollow, packed with fiber, and they've got polyphenols that are useful for lowering inflammation as well. Berries are actually really good. And then, because I follow what I call the Mediterranean style of eating, I love to have those vegetables that are actually used in both the Mediterranean and Asia, Mediterranean style cooking, the bok choy, the kale, chicory, escarole, all of those types of leafy greens. So those would be the 5 I would actually take with me.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. We can reverse stage 4 cancer by what we eat. And this is science-based. Our metabolic health is the best medicine. It's now proven. So to recap, coffee is great to reduce cancer. It's also great to speed up your metabolism. It does so many things. I've done it my entire life. Inflammation is gasoline on the fire. So if you're overweight, you have a very high probability of having metabolic problems, including cancer, diabetes, whatever. Diet has to be fun and sustainable. No alcohol. Here's an alternative. Dr. Lee's 5 favorite foods: coffee, tea, tree nuts, almonds, and walnuts, tomatoes, berries, and green leafy vegetables, including broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and bok choy. Now, Coach Bill is here to help you. I provide amazing guidance for people. I offer a free 15-minute phone call, Zoom call to establish goals. I have a 100% guarantee, and I help men achieve the 1% club. What the 1% club is being ripped, which gives you the advantage of having more social status than mansions, Lamborghinis, and yachts. I've been on both sides of the fence. Being ripped is by far the best. I love feeling 20 years old. I love knowing I have a long life expectancy. I love being ripped and having high energy. It's amazing. And I can help you. So DM me and I'll make a difference. Have a great day and thank you. I highly suggest you try the fitness meals and the fitness bowls. It's a great way to get north of 30 grams of protein, low carbohydrates, and high fiber, shipped nationwide to your door. It can't get any easier. 40 years of experience that I've done, and I've made it simple. Think fast food, half the price of McDonald's, delivered to your door.